Hello Year 10, welcome back to our next session of the Rivers Revision series. We're going to be looking at meanders today, and on the screen you can see a beautiful time lapse of a river progressing over time. So this is over about a 30-year period, so from 1984 to 2012. And as you can see, the river is changing quite dramatically during that time. And the reason it's changing quite dramatically is due to those processes of erosion and deposition that we've been looking at in previous sessions. If you look at the river and how it changes in its shape, we call it the sinuosity or the curvature of the river. And you can see it starts to curve and bend in different ways, and there's not really any pattern to it as such. And that's because in this lower part of the river, so we're now down in the lowland areas, similar to where we are actually around Flixton and Trafford, we've got the river is starting to not erode downwards, so it's not vertical erosion, but it's now lateral erosion, so it's going across into the floodplain. And as it goes into the floodplain, it creates these shapes. These shapes we call meanders, which are the bends in the river. And if you watch what happens, they grow. So let's look at this one up at the top, for example. They kind of move across the landscape. And what you can see is as they actually get bigger and more loopy, they sometimes cut through and they create something called an oxbow lake. And you can actually see on here, so for example, in a minute, when it goes back, you can see here, there's a bit where it used to be a river, but it isn't. And that's because it's been cut off. And we'll look at that in a bit and how those oxbow lakes form. So let's move on to what we need to understand about meanders. Meanders, as I said, are in the lower part of the river. Just to show you these diagrams first of all. You can see that there's, again, 4 stages. Something that's really, really good about the rivers topic is the majority of the landforms are in 4 stages. So if you have that in your mind for when you are writing an explanation, that helps you then to sequence it. And if you've got 4 clear steps, it's a lot easier to do. So if you look at the 4 diagrams that you've got on the screen, on the left-hand side, so you've got the top one here. So you've got a small bend in the river. We've got in a river different flows of the water. So some parts of the river, the water will be flowing faster, and some parts it will be flowing slower. And that's because of the depth of the water. So what you tend to find is the deeper the water, the faster the flow. And that's because there's less friction to slow down the flow of the river. And so the velocity is quite high at certain parts, the deeper parts of the river. And in rivers, the deepest part of a river on the meander is always the outside of the meander. And that's because that's mainly where the most erosion's going on, and so it gets deeper and therefore the faster flow happens. And so that's what the top diagram's kind of showing. This red line is the fastest area of flow. So it's always towards the outside bend of the river. And how you know the difference, I'll explain in a moment. The next diagram, as you can see, we've added something onto this diagram. So we've added some yellow and some kind of browny areas. And those are representing now areas of deposition and areas of erosion. So as I said, on the outside bend, you always get the deepest flow. And that's because that's where you've got the most erosion going on. Now, if you are to bend your finger, you might want to do it now. So you bend your finger. As you bend your finger, your knuckle obviously is on the outside of your finger. And so how I remember what the outside and the inside bend is when I bend my finger, my knuckle is the outside and the inside bit that is kind of covered up with the rest of your finger now because it's been closed is the inside bend. And you can look at that on rivers as well. So if you're ever unsure which is the outside or the inside bend, hook your finger, have a look, where's your knuckle, put that on the river, and you can see that the outside bend is where your knuckle is, the inside bend is the inside of your finger. So outside, always areas of deposition, always areas of erosion, go back on myself, and inside, always areas of deposition. So if you look at the cross section here, sometimes you're given this cross section in exams and asked to explain what's going on. So you can see the outside bend is where river cliff is. So the bend of a river is in the cross section looks like this. So the outside has a cliff. And the reason it's got a cliff is because there's constant erosion going on down here. and because that erosion's going on, it's making this bit deeper, and it's making an unstable part of the river channel, which is we call the river cliff. On the inside bend, we've got the slowest flow, and because of slow flow, we get deposition. So if you remember back, deposition always happens in areas of either slow flow or no flow, or areas of increased friction. So shallower areas create more friction and therefore more deposition. So on the outside bend, you get a river cliff, deep, fast moving water. On the inside bend, you get a slip-off slope, shallow area of deposition. So over time, what happens is you get a small bend. The bends then get bigger because the outside bend erodes and the inside bend you get deposition. And then what will happen is this here, third diagram, will occur. So you get two outside bends which get really, really close together. Now it doesn't happen all the time, so it's only when the bends just so happen to meet each other. And you get the two areas of erosion almost meeting. And we call this bit here the neck of the land because it kind of looks like a head, this bit of land that's in the middle. So this is the neck of land, or the neck of the meander. And so what will end up happening is eventually the two outside bends, which you can see on diagram 3, which are really close together, they will keep on eroding until they break through. And so fourth diagram shows that. So eventually, normally during times of high flow, so a flood, the meander will break through and it will create a new channel, as you can see in the fourth diagram. And over time, what will happen is that new channel, that'll be where the fastest flow is. And then the other channel, the loop, the old meander, there won't be much flow going through there. And so you'll get deposition where the meander's been cut off, and then it'll create this thing called an oxbow lake. So I know that's a lot of detail, but let's look at it in very, very simple terms on here. So as I said, on the first one, you get the flow of the water on the outside bend. That's where the fastest flow is. And the outside bend will erode. The inside bend, you'll get deposition. Over time, two outside bends will migrate or move closer to each other and create a neck of land between the meanders, and then eventually that neck of that land will break through, creating a new path for the river, leaving behind the oxbow lake because deposition will happen along the old meander. So that's meanders and oxbow lakes. So anytime you're asked to describe how a meander forms or an oxbow lake forms, you're describing all of this process. You're describing from the start where it bends all the way through to where the neck of the meander breaks through, creating a new channel, and then deposition causing the oxbow lake. Really, really straightforward process. If you go on to Seneca, there's some wonderful things on there that you can look at, or on BBC Bite Size, there's some really, really good videos to help you through that. So just to show you on an aerial photograph, this is what it'd look like, kind of similar to the beginning. So we've got A would be the inside bend. Remember, bend your finger, that'd look like the inside of your finger. B is the outside bend. C is the neck of land, okay, starting to form between the two outside bends. D, that is a meander scar, or what we now call an oxbow lake. So that's actually dried up now, created a bit of land. There's also one just next to where the C is, you can see there, and just next to where the A is there. So that's D, so that's the oxbow lake. E, you've actually got a river cliff there, so you can see a cliff area, and that's actually stopping this meander from extending outwards, because it's probably a bit of hard rock. And then finally, F is a little bit of a valley that's in next to the that cliff area there. So that's meanders. Hopefully you've understood it a little bit more. Just finally, one last thing on an OS map. You are expected on an OS, on Ordnance Survey map, to represent, to be able to recognise, different features. So you can see here, this is a river going through. So it's called the River Till, and that's the river represented on a map. So you can see it meandering across that area there. So you've got some meanders there that's been shown. You've got Millfield, which is a village, and that's above the floodplain. You can tell that's above the floodplain because it's on these contour lines. Okay, so it's slightly above the floodplain. The floodplain's flat and all around the river, so you can see the floodplain extends all the way across pretty much to where these red areas have been drawn on the map. You've then got erosion of the outside bend. You can see that's where the erosion is going to be taking place because it's the outside bend. You've got deposition on the inside bend. You can tell it's deposition happening here because there's a plantation. Deposition on rivers tends to have really, really nice fertile soil. So it normally is where you get like farmland appearing or plantations of forests and things like that. You've also got the river floodplain here is between 35 and 40 metres. You can tell that because you've got a 35 marker on here. It shows you that's 35 metres above sea level. But also if you look at the contour lines, you can't see it on here. Oh, you can, there you go. It says 40. So it's between 35 and 40 at that point. And then finally you've got an oxbow lake there. Nice small oxbow lake that's shown. That's probably still full of water. You can even see actually here, that's probably a bit of the old meander as well. So, as I said, that is River Meanders and Oxbow Lakes in a nutshell. Hope you've enjoyed it, and we shall come back soon with our next video. Thank you.